the very first part of marriage, we tried to turn each other into ourselves.
Right.
And that was a big mistake. So I would say the first few years were were more difficult because of that, because we hurt each other really.
If you're struggling in your marriage or wondering if it's even salvageable, before you give up, let us come alongside you with a biblical vision for marriage. We bring a counselor's heart and a pastor's heart into the mix to equip you and encourage you for lifelong love.
Today's episode of The Vision Driven Marriage is brought to you by the Blessed Family Recovery Summit, happening October 24th through the 26th. Now, if you have ever felt overwhelmed by the challenges of addiction in your family, this summit is for you. It's more than just an event. It's an opportunity to find strength, hope, and healing in the midst of the chaos. Proverbs 13:12 tells us that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And if you're in a season of feeling like hope is slipping away, this summit is designed to show you that there's support and a path forward. You don't have to walk this journey alone. There will be 16 inspiring speakers who have walked similar paths. You'll also hear faith-based strategies for healing and practical tools to help you navigate your relationship with an addicted loved one. This summit is packed with resources to help you reclaim peace in your home. You'll learn how to guide your loved one without losing yourself in the process. So if you're ready for hope, healing, and practical steps forward, be sure to join us for the Blessed Family Recovery Summit, October 24th through the 26th. For more information, check the link in the show notes. You don't want to miss this. Welcome to the 80th episode of the Vision Driven Marriage podcast. Today we are thrilled to have Don Manning with us from Crazy Cool Family. Don and his wife Suzanne have been married for over 30 years and are parents to 7 amazing children. Through their resources at crazycoolfamily.com and their podcast, they've been on mission to help families rethink how they approach family, one relationship at a time. Together, we'll dive into how focusing on shared values rather than methods or criticism can deepen intimacy and bring fresh purpose to your marriage. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Vision Driven Marriage. We're Doug and Leslie Davis, and today we're really excited to have Don Manning here with us from crazycoolfamily.com. Welcome, Don.
Hey, thank you so much.
It's so good to have you with us, because one of the things that we have really been hearing from people, not only in our church, but also some folks that we know listen to the podcast, is that there's difficulty that goes along with the different phases of married life. And when you have young children and then your kids get a little older and even into the empty nest phase, things are different. And so since you all focus on family and you focus on the things that we get the privilege to do as we raise the family that God's given to us, we'd love to have a conversation about the things that God's taught you through that process.
Great. Where should we start? We've been doing this for over 3 decades, so right. I don't know where to start with that. The very first thing is, our listeners probably want to get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us just a little bit first about your family and then about your ministry? Well, so Suzanne and I, my wife and Suzanne and I have been married for going on 33 years this November. We've got 7 kids that go from 35 to 18. I've got a senior in high school that's the last one. So Suzanne, when we got married, she had a 2-year-old daughter, Molly, which is our oldest. And then we had 3 girls and 3 boys in that order. And so now we have 4 girls and 3 boys in that order. And so we didn't start with an empty nest.
Right.
We started with I was immediately a dad, and that had its own impact. Sometimes as we really didn't get started, I'll explain a little bit as we talk about marriage in just a minute. But this will be the first year next year that we release our last son to college, and so we truly are empty nesters after almost 34 years of parenting.
Wow. And I know a lot of the folks who are listening right now can relate to that because they, as soon as they were married, they had an instant family as well. And those who can't, they may have experienced a year or 2 or 3 where they were able to just focus on the marriage. But for those who jump straight into not only a marriage relationship, but a family relationship, what does that dynamic do as you're looking to grow together as husband and wife?
So Molly, my oldest, was 2 when we got married. I mean, she's not 2 anymore, obviously, but Suzanne and I came home from our honeymoon. We went to Cancun, and so we came into this little duplex in Lewisville, Texas. We're from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've born and raised in the north of Dallas-Fort Worth, and so we come home to our little duplex, and so Molly, my daughter, had a problem of waking up in the middle of the night and crying. So, the first thing I come in, I'm like, and I've never been a parent in my life. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just know everything my wife's doing wrong at this point. That's all I know. I just know that I'm going to do it better, right? And so first night we get back from our honeymoon, and Molly starts crying again, and Suzanne's told me about this. I'm like, don't worry, honey, I'm going to go take care of this. So and I'm 27 years old, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I walk our bedrooms, her bedroom's upstairs and ours downstairs. So walk up there in my gym shorts. I don't even have a shirt on. I'm like, 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, Molly, we're going to go to bed. There's no sheriff in town. We're going to go to bed. And so I pick her up, and I'm like, now talking to her right eye to eye, and Molly has a little gag reflex, and so Molly proceeds to throw up all over me. I mean, just the welcome to marriage, welcome to parenting. I mean, it's going down my back. I mean, I'm just okay. What have I gotten myself into? This is, and so that was the welcome back from the honeymoon and welcome back into marriage and family. It got a little better from there, and
I'm glad that it did, because I know right now there's dads across America listening to this going, I know what that warm feels like going down the back. So,
yes. Yeah, we have one of those stories, don't we? Only your story was with a newborn.
Right.
And picked her up, put her over his shoulder, was patting that. All of a sudden you've got this, baby going down the back.
Yeah.
And
so we understand, we get that part. I'm glad that it does, and it does get better. It does.
Well, and I think that what Suzanne and I would say in as a marriage-driven, as a vision-driven marriage podcast, that our marriage was always the toughest relationship for us, and for many reasons. One of them is and we were both we are at the same church today that we helped start our first year of marriage. So, I mean, we've been grounded been taught, been discipled, been doing good things for our marriage. When we first started, we would go out on our anniversary and go out for a couple of days, and usually had a newborn with us at almost every time. But we did some good things, but we just found out we were really different people, not different in bad ways. We both had our great qualities. We both had our issues, but and also I think having a lot of kids, it became more tactical than relational at times, and so and also going through pregnancy. What guys don't realize a lot is, the woman's pregnant for 9 months, and then it takes about another 9 months for her body to get back into place, and even the hormones and everything. So every baby was 18 months of change. And it just, that do that 6 times. And then we're coaching sports teams, and we're working. I'm in the business world. Suzanne's at home, and she's homeschooling. And then we wound up going to a couple of private schools in the area over the years. It's a lot, it's just a lot. And it's easy for marriage to kind of take a back burner because, we kind of think both of us are pretty independent people. Oh, Don can take care of himself. Oh, Suzanne, she's all right. She's doing pretty good. She's not crying today. Everything's fine, and whatever. And it's like it becomes this, but in the midst of it all, we never had a bad marriage. I mean, we were always got along. We learned how to work together and things. But we were talking about this a little bit before the one of the biggest things we learned is that the very first part of marriage, we tried to turn each other into ourselves.
Right.
And that was a big mistake. So I would say the first few years were were more difficult because of that, because we hurt each other really, because I kept trying to tell Suzanne says she tried to make me into a hairy woman and that she wanted me to think like her, talk like her, see the things she saw so that I would, and we do it. What we tell parents a lot now is, even with parenting, we do it with the best intentions.
Right.
We want, for me, I tried to systematize Suzanne, because if she, my wife is more of a creative thinker. She's super relational. And so, but I kept trying to say, as she did homeschool or she organized the house, honey, if you would just have a better system, if you would do it the way I would do it, man, wouldn't your life be better? And wouldn't life be so much better if you would just do it the way I asked, the way I'm suggesting.
How'd that work out for you?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, she took all my advice, and just implemented everything. And, but what we learned and the way we shifted is that, someone told us, why don't you make your spouse the best version of themselves?
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, that was a real revelation. And actually, when somebody told me that, I started to appreciate my wife for who she was versus who I wanted her to be.
That gave her the room and the freedom to appreciate you for how the Lord had made you too. That created some space. Yeah. Created some space in the relationship. I know it's a prevalent thing out there, because somebody, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't remember who, but somebody wrote a book called "I Would Like You More If You Were Like Me."
Really?
And it's a marriage book.
Right. It's a normal thing. We think that that's what we want, but I love how you explained it. Help your spouse become the best version of them. And the other thing that I would encourage people to really consider in the process of trying to help your spouse become the best version of themselves is to figure out, because of your differences, how can I love my spouse a little better than I've been loving her? How can I love my wife just a little better than I have been? Because that'll help her become the best version of herself.
But then it led to it. So that was good. And one of the things I like to tell marriages and parents is real change happens in months and years, not days and weeks.
Right.
So, all this is happening as we are morphing over time, and allowing, like you're saying, her to become the best version of herself. And that helped us out a lot, because you're right. Like Suzanne would say things like, she started to appreciate the fact, like, I don't notice things. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of in the clouds. I'm kind of an absent-minded professor. And so I'm an absent-minded professor who's an accountant. So figure that one out. I mean, I'm a CPA by trade, but I really have more of a visionary type mindset. And, but so when I come in, the house is a mess or whatever, it doesn't really bother me. I'm not OCD at any way. I mean, and at first that would upset her, because she notices things. She's, particular. She loves beauty. She loves things to be in order. And so that is something that is a part of her life. But then she became to appreciate the fact, oh, you know what? He doesn't see things, and that's a great thing, because then when everything's all a mess, he's not on to me about why I'm not. So she turned it into things that she appreciated, instead of things that quote unquote annoyed her, which really it didn't have to annoy her. She chose to have it annoy her, just like I choose to let things annoy me. And so we started to, do more of appreciating. I started to see my wife different, started to see that relational aspect of her, and started to see and it really changed our parenting too, because I started seeing man, what if we learned to connect more with our kids? Wouldn't that change things? And, to the point now where I tell dads, if you'll become a student of your wife instead of her critic, you'll be amazed what you learn about family. Because God put the woman, and this is a stereotype, it's not always true, but just like, parenting's not a guarantee and it's not a formula or anything, but in general, God put the woman in the marriage to be the nurturer and to be the more relational one. And so I started to watch her instead of criticize her. I started to watch her interact with our kids. And I started to learn about how to reach their hearts better, how to speak to them better, how to, we call it now in parenting to get it to be their idea instead of ours, but it really helped our relationship too, because we started to appreciate each other more. But in the same light, it was still somewhat, and this is talking, we do our parenting and our marriage in decades. The first decade was like this, the second decade was like this, the third decade, and then now we're starting our fourth decade. In the second decade, I would say the first decade was just survival, and we kept trying to change each other, and we were just, she was always pregnant, and, Suzanne calls it the wiping stage, because all we did was wipe kids somewhere, the counter, their noses, their bottoms, something, we were always wiping something. And, but in that second stage, we started to appreciate one another, but it was still, busy, and it was still, we were still dealing with, I think, somewhat surface relationship. And I can remember, well, let me back up though, because one of the things that I thought, and I really want to bring it out in this podcast because I think it's super important. So once you start appreciating the wife and the wife starts appreciating the husband, so for who they are, you still have differences. You still have differences. And so now, in fact, you may have more differences because you're not trying to be like each other. You're letting each other be themselves. And so we had to really explore, what is it? How do we have a unity in parenting, and unity in life? Because, Jesus said in John 17, he prays for the disciples, and then he prays for us. And his prayer for us is unity, that we may be one as he is one with the Father. Well, so unity is super important, but we're trying to make each other the best version of ourselves. How do you have unity? Right. And, so we started to study that a little bit. And what we found was we unite under values. We unite under, and what's a value? It's simply something that's important to us. And so, and I want parents to catch this because it was a huge breakthrough for our marriage. And I believe there's a couple of things that really set our family on the right course. One of them was learning to connect with our kids instead of trying to control them. The other one is learning to unite under values versus trying to be alike. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, that we want our kid to make good grades. We want our kids to do well in school. Okay. Well, so often the parent, one parent, the husband may come to the wife and say, man, you never get on to the kids about, I'm having to do everything or whatever. Well, okay. Again, if I'm the dad doing that, I'm trying to make my wife like me, use my method to accomplish our value. Okay. Instead, what if we change that discussion? Hey, honey, can we agree that we want our child to make good grades? Yes, we do. We agree on the value. We want them, what value is that? In our house, it wasn't the valedictorian. We said, we want our kids to make A's and B's. And because we wanted school to be an important part, but not the most important. We wanted we wanted to be at church. We wanted to do activities. We realized that was, not going to be a valedictorian standard. But then it's like, honey, how do you want to help them? She might have a conversation with that child about it. And together we agreed to and another value we agreed on was we want them to make good grades on their own. Mm-hmm. So when they were younger, we were okay if they made some mistakes on that fourth grade spelling test. Wow, they made a 75 on that. Okay, first of all, who cares? Because it's fourth grade. And second of all, though, what did they learn from it? And how did they learn how to spell on their own without mom and dad having to be bothered? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? Did you do that? You know, and so, but we would handle it different ways, but we agreed on the values, and that allowed us to be different. But come together in the unity that God wants for us.
Well,
that makes sense.
Is such a biblical way of looking at it. It's what we encourage people to do too. One of the things that I've used to describe that difference is often it's kind of like the difference between porcelain and steel. And you know, she's very much more like porcelain. She's very much prettier than I am, and is more delicate and does things that are very, very important. And there are times when that is the most valuable thing that could ever exist. I'm a little more like steel. You can drop me and I don't make, you know, you're not going to leave a mark. And,
right.
You know, but which one's going to be more valuable? It depends on what you're doing, but you can use both to accomplish the same task. They're just not going to do it in the same way. And, you know, there'll be certain things where porcelain's much more appropriate for the usage, other things where steel is. And if we can understand that neither one's more valuable, both are important, they can accomplish the same thing. We see what you're talking about. We're not going to do it the same way, but we can come together in biblical unity for absolutely the same purpose.
And actually, you can come to appreciate the fact that, you know, God made us different. God, and so therefore, He wants our differences to work together for the good of the child. You know, my family does not need two Don Mannings.
Right.
That's not. I mean, they're having hard enough trouble putting up with one, much less two. But you know, they you know, they need a Don Manning and a Suzanne Manning.
Yes.
You know, and they need us working together to bring our strengths to the table in unity. But you know, so often then, you know, those parents start to say, well, you know, well, your mom's just does that, or your mom, you know, it's like, no, you don't get to do that. You get to say, man, mom does this. You know, your mom's for you. Your mom is, you know, and she may do it differently than dad does it, but neither one of those are right or wrong. It's just differences in our personalities. And so we're both have your best interests at heart. We're both for you, and we're both going to help you be your best.
Are you dealing with addiction in your family? Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is the tree of life." But when we place our hope in Christ alone, we find hope that never fails, a hope that anchors our souls, as Hebrews 6:19 reminds us. This fall, join us for the Blessed Family Recovery Summit 2024, a free summit where we come together to find God in the midst of the struggle of addiction. Blessed Family Recovering Summit, Finding God Amidst Addiction, October 24th through the 26th. Join us at blessedfamilyrecoverysummit.com. Yeah, I love that, uniting under a value. And I think it, at least in my mind, what that does is brings out the ability to appreciate the equality that's in a relationship, because you're both different but yet equal in that relationship, able to accomplish the same things under that value, but looking at them very differently.
Very different.
Yeah, and I just think that is just really a cool way to...
Well, and what I find is that most parents can agree on values.
Yes, yeah.
They will not agree on methods. Most Christian, now, if you've got a non-believer and a believer, or somebody who's, well, that's going to be different. But two believing parents, if you got two parents that are in a church, let's say they're coming and they're willing to surrender to the Lord in their walk and their next steps to the Lord, those parents are going to say, it's rare that parent's going to say, oh my goodness, we have totally different values. Mm-hmm. They will say we have totally different methods, right? And they will say we're totally different people. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to and really another thing it does is the value takes the personal nature out of it. Mm-hmm. We're not agreeing. It's not my way versus your way anymore. It's, hey, let's seek the Lord for the right value. Let's line the value up with Scripture
and let's see where God is working, and then let's work together to accomplish the value. And what is vision for your family? Then vision becomes a bunch of values.
Yeah.
Vision becomes, what are because you're only going to get to accomplish so many things in your vision. So you get to choose, and that creates these great marriage discussions where you agree on the values. And then what does that do? It brings more unity into the marriage. You're not fighting because you're able to agree on the values.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the other things that does that's really a blessing, we've seen people who, after their kids were grown, they've struggled because they realized that the children were so much their focus that they were, once the children were out of the house, it was like two strangers living together. When you have those values that you share, you're continuing to build the marriage while you're, parenting your children.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the other things that you could encourage people to do?
Yeah, I would say
as they're
so.
parenting?
We talked about second decade. I'm actually writing a book as we start here because I'm going through I'm getting the outline in my head of a book. It's coming in,
Awesome.
about decades of marriage. But the third decade, I would say this is so. We realized somewhere in that third decade that and I know that this happened for me, is that our marriage was good, but there was a lack of safety, a lack of connectivity, a lack of intimacy, and not that, again, it was good.
Yeah.
But I went before the Lord and I just said, is this it?
Right.
Is this as good? And this is probably year 22 of this was, 8 years ago, something like that, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. Is this as good as it's going to get? Is this what I need to think about for the rest of my life? And even then I was like, not bad. We're friends. We don't fight. But I really wanted something more from the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly there was some fear there in me. There were some feelings I had that I felt like when I stepped into the trying to solve the bigger problems, then I would get chastised, and I would get told that that it would give her a sense of rejection from me. I felt like that when I went in there, it didn't do any good. I usually got I would come back and be wounded myself, and so therefore I'll stay here and you stay here, and for the podcast, my hands are close but they're not together, instead of coming together as I put my hands together in that intimacy. And I'm like, I just went before the Lord and I said, Lord, I want more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And he directed me to Philippians 2, and I get emotional when I think about it, but he directed me to Philippians 2, and he said, and in that passage it says that do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others. It actually says above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but rather he made himself nothing. Okay, so, and I'm like, okay, God, I know that passage. I've obviously memorized that passage. What do you want to say to me about marriage in that passage? Why are you bringing me to this passage? He said, are you willing to do that for your marriage?
Mm.
And I said, well, what about her? And I mean, is she going to do it too?
That's where the crisis of belief is at, right?
Is she gonna go with me? He said, I'm not answering that question. He said, and I said, what if so you're saying, and I remember having this conversation with God over a few months. You're telling me that I got to go love her at that level, and there's no guarantee that she's going to love me at that level. And secondly, I'm going to get hurt. I mean, when I go over there, I've been there before, I've done it. I got hurt, and I know what that looks like. And he goes, I said, what do I do about that? He said, well, I'm not going to guarantee you any outcome. I will guarantee you this: when you get hurt, you come back to me. You don't go to her. You come back to me, and I'm going to heal you. And I'm going to heal you every time. And no matter how many times you get hurt, I'm going to heal you every time. And I'm like, so that's your, so I felt like I walked into this crisis of belief, as you're calling it, Leslie, and you're saying that, yeah. And I feel like God showed me a road, and it was like, you could either go down this road where everything's going to stay the same and you're going to be buddies, friends, and everything's going to be okay. And you're going to be a lot like a lot of your friends because a lot of those marriages are okay. Or you're going to do the hard stuff, and you're going to trust me, and you're going to dive into more than you probably can imagine. And I remember I just felt like I walked up to a cliff, and I said, okay, I'm jumping. I'm going to dive off into this. And I started to step into things in our marriage that I wouldn't step into before. And you know what happened? I got hurt. And, sometimes she would say things that sometimes I'd misinterpret them. Sometimes I wouldn't misinterpret them, but, and sure enough, my walk with the Lord was at a point where God really could heal me. In that past, I learned a lot about identity. I learned a lot about his grace, and I learned a lot about how much he loves me. And so, and we went through that for a few years to where, I felt like that I was stepping into things that, and then a few years later, the breakthrough came, in her life. And so she started to, see that, she wanted to also work on some things in her life, there were some things that she became open to in her life that she saw. She started wanting to learn more about who I was. And, we even got into Enneagrams and just the personality, differences and why, and certain breakthroughs that came. And so it wasn't a linear path by any stretch. And in the past, if she were sitting here talking, she would feel like that she had tried at times, and, and it's never this flow. I'm just talking about it from my perspective, but you know what? I mean, today, our marriage is better than ever. Our marriage is we still, I call it now, I'm learning to speak the language of my wife. It is literally like learning a foreign language.
Yeah.
And you got to learn the vowels, you got to learn the verbs, and I still feel like sometimes I come in and I'm just stammering in the language, but I speak it.
Changes, right?
That's true too. Yeah. Yeah.
It's fluid.
Yeah. Well, but and the rate that what I encourage men, I can't talk to women about marriage. I've never been a married woman, as much as my wife wanted me to be. I never, as much as I wanted her to be a married man, I just never have. But I can talk to married men, and I think that for us men, God put us as the leader in our home, and he wants us to have a toughness but in going after the marriage relationship and going after kid relationships too. Right. But the key is what I had to get ready for. I don't know that I'd have been ready for it at year 10, but the key is you got to be able to be healed by God.
Yeah.
Because your wife, I've got friends of mine that I talk to about marriage, and they're like, they can't take the rejection of their wives. And honestly, it makes them drink. It makes them, they so don't like the rejection of their wives that they won't talk to her. They'll go hunting. They'll do whatever it takes because they can't stand to walk in that room and be rejected because it hits them at their core. Well,
I don't think wives know that.
Yes.
There is not an understanding of how that is such a core issue in relationships. Most women don't understand that at all.
But if that man doesn't have another alternative, a better alternative, which is Jesus Christ, to be able to go heal him. So, I can, there were times when I felt rejected by my wife. I had to go back to the Lord, and the Lord would tell me, I love you. Not only that, Don, I'm crazy about you. And I had to be okay with that. I did my best. I did my very best. And so no matter what, it was good, and God was good. And that was, and that would sustain me to go back into the fight, because otherwise that's what I tell men is, you got to be careful. If you're not getting discipled in your church, if you're not getting grounded in who you are, then that's where the men don't know what to do with it, because they go over there and they're getting, and I'm just, again, the women have their other, this is not, I'm not talking about that,
side to the coin.
but I'm talking about from a man but the cool deal is too, men, is we have so much power to influence our marriage in a good way. I think that so many men, and I did it too for many years, I sat on the sidelines. And here's another thing I learned that was fascinating to me, is that I thought, so when we would have conflict, I would walk away from it thinking I was doing good because I didn't get mad. Okay. And, I didn't get mad, and I would walk away and I'd be like, I'll just let her be her, and that's it. But in reality, her perception was I didn't care. And that I wasn't willing to fight. It was almost like, it wasn't healthy, but it was almost like if I was willing to fight, then at least I showed that I was, and I thought I was doing good by walking away from it. But what I learned was I had to walk back into it. And sometimes I didn't do it right, but by doing that, it's like, it showed her that I was willing to step in, that I was willing to lead, that I was willing to be almost like not be a wimp, and there was something in that needed, and here I was, thought I was doing good by being more accommodating. But God didn't, but that wasn't what was speaking her language. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
It really does. And, I think a lot of guys are kind of understanding now that, engagement is going to be more than just giving her a ring. It's going to be the rest of the marriage. You got to engage.
There you go.
And I think that's good, because a lot of times we think I'm going to be kind. She sees he doesn't care. So, really good to point out that those differences, once again, they're going to exist, but we can come together, and especially under the same values, and we can work at it. And I think there's a lot of things that you've shared that are encouraging couples who are in that same spot you've been describing, and they realize it's not just us. We can come together too in unity under the values, rather than trying to make each other act like us.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, that's just kind of, it's a belief in our ministry that every marriage can win and every family can win. And I know you guys you share that, and it's like, we're not taking no for an answer with, when I was a young dad, I just said, I told the Lord two things. I'm going to learn everything I can about family, and I'm going to give it all I got.
There you
and
go.
If that doesn't work, it's on you,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I want to encourage. Every marriage can win. If you got, I think it's hard when you have a believer or non-believer. Scripture even addresses that, and it says if they leave, go for it. If not, continue to love them. And I think I've seen those marriages get restored too. But when you have two believers, and they can win if they. And what I find though is that a lot of marriages are working hard at the wrong things.
Yeah.
And when they start working hard at the right things, God things, not my way, not Don Manning's advice, but biblically scriptural deals that they're doing, then they will start to have more success.
God will start honoring that, right? And so tell us about that ministry and where our listeners can find your resources.
Well, crazycoolfamily.com is the first place to go. We started it several years ago. It actually started, so like I said, we've been at the same church for over since our first year of marriage. And it actually just started when you have 7 kids, and really what happened is we started to really focus on relationship and connection with our kids. What if we stopped trying to control them so much and we started to connect with them? What if we showed them a God worth following? What if we let them make mistakes? What if we, built self-control in them rather than parent control? And man, it just started working. 4 daughters. And, when you have teenage daughters, I tell people all the time that when you have teenage daughters that love the Lord, it's the best evangelism tool you'll ever have, because world takes notice of teenagers that love Jesus. And so people at our church started asking us questions. What are you guys doing? I'm an elder at the church, and all this. And so I'm in the leadership, and I'm like, we're like, we don't know. We're just surviving. I'm coaching 3 basketball teams right now. What are you doing tomorrow? I don't know. But and so, but the Lord just impressed upon our heart to write down what we learned so we could pass it to the next generation. And because, we just have this crazy vision, Suzanne and I do, that every family can win. I remember having 7 kids and telling the Lord, all right, Lord, I'm going 7 for 7. I'm not gonna, and if I don't want, because I saw ahead of me like the brokenness of marriages and parent-child relationships, and it broke my heart. It still breaks my heart to this day. And and I found this passion inside of me, and Suzanne too. She was always a step ahead of me, in what we were doing. But and I always say that our ministry, I was just a scribe. I just went down and wrote down what she said. But it was out of that we just started teaching parents, and at our church, never thought it'd go beyond our church. And so God had other ideas, and so we wrote a book a few years ago, and now what we do, we have a podcast like you guys. We've been doing this is our 6th year to do a podcast. It's Crazy Cool Family Podcast. And so what I would do for parents, for one, we're not a marriage ministry. So we marriage is a part of the family, but we don't choose to be a marriage ministry. We choose to. Our mission is to inspire and equip parents to build their very best family.
And I love that.
That encompasses marriage.
Yes, it does encompass marriage, and it speaks to our listeners, because I know there's a higher percentage of our listeners that have children than the percentage that doesn't have children. And so it is definitely a relevant topic for
and parenting's a big part of marriage, and so and so what I would do is there's 2 things I would challenge parents to do. One in particular is to go to our website and sign up for our daily email. Some people don't like daily emails, but I promise you're going to like this one. You don't have to read it every day. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but basically it's like it is 2 minutes, and it will be inspiring and encouraging to you. And it also, what the daily email does is it gives you information on our other resources. So we have our book, we have some workbooks that we work through that you can buy and go through with your family. All the same, we're not very smart. We have one simple message that we keep going over and over again. So it's all the same thing, but it's just deeper and deeper versions. We kind of think that's how Jesus is. He was simple but very profound. And so what we put in there, we hope to be simple. But it's like, for example, learning to be a listening parent. Okay, that James 1:19 says, "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry." That's 3 lines in 1 chapter of James. Took me 25 years to learn how to do. And so that's the kind of stuff you're going to see in there. What you should focus on, these simple, profound truths that you should focus on to give you the best chance of having an awesome family. So just go into crazycoolfamily.com, scroll down a little bit, sign up for the daily email. There's all kinds of our products in there too, but that's what I really like people to do.
Sure. And I will have all of the things linked in our show notes. And so it has been awesome to have you, Don. We've just enjoyed this time that we've spent together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Don.
Absolutely. Enjoy your day.
And we want to thank all of you who've been listening as well. Our guest today has been Don Manning, and he and his wife, Suzanne, have crazycoolfamily.com. We want to encourage you to go check them out. And we are Doug and Leslie Davis. This is the Vision Driven Marriage. And as always, we continue to pray that God will solidify your marriage.